We have the cranial bones here, the frontal, the parietal, the temporal, and the occipital. The occipital has a bony prominence, protuberance, and that is to anchor the ligaments for the neck. The temporal comes down and connects with the temporal mandibular joint, has the mastoid process, and under there the styloid process. Has the external acoustic meatus and the squamous part. If you go interiorly, you have the temporal petrous part of the temporal bone, which houses the middle and internal ear cavities, and you have the internal acoustic meatus, which passes through the cranial nerves used for hearing. You have the greater wing of the xephenoid process, the lesser wing. You have the optic canal, which passes through the cranial nerves for seeing, and you have the sella turca, which is the saddle-like structure fossa that houses the pituitary glands. While we're in here, the ethmoid bone has the crista galla and sits on the cribriform plate. The crista galla secures the brain into the skull, and the cribriform plate passes through the nerves used for smelling. Externally on the xephenoid, and the xephenoid bone, it's going to be right in here. Sorry, the xephenoid bone is right here. Okay. The sutures, the coronial attaches the parietal and the frontal. The sagittal connects the two parietals, and the lambdoid connects the parietal and the occipital, and the squamous attaches the temporal to the parietal. On the facial bones here, we have the maxilla, which is the top of the jawline. We have the zygomatic, which is formed from the temporal and the frontal bones. We have the nasal bones. We have the vomer. We have the ethmoid bone right there. And the vomer and the ethmoid bone form the bony nasal septum. And then the inferior nasal concha, which forms the lateral wall of the nasal septum. And then we go down, and the alveolar process is the bottoms and tops that connect the teeth. We go down to the mandible, or the body of the mandible, the mandibular angle. We have the mandibular condyle. We have the ramus. This is the ramus of the mandible, mandibular angle. We have the condylar process up here, and the cornoid process up in here, up there. And then this is the mandibular notch right there, right in there. Moving on to the vertebral column. There are 4 curves of the vertebral column. They are the cervical, the lumbar curvatures, which are the primary, the thoracic, and the sacral curvatures. The cervical vertebrae, there's 7 of them. They begin with the atlas, which anchors in the skull to the neck. Moving down to the axis, And that would look like being able to do this. That's the movement of the atlas connecting to the skull bone. We have 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, and then 5 vertebrae fused for the sacrum and 4 fused for the coccyx bone. On the thoracic vertebrae, we have the spinous process, which is like the little hook that comes out, the transverse process, the intervertebral forum, which is the hole in the vertebrae on the inside of the body, and then the discs go in between each vertebrae. On the sternum, we have the top part, which is the manubrium, the body, and then the xiphoid process, and this is the jugular notch. The ribs, you have 12 ribs altogether. 7 of them are true, 3 of them are false, and 2 are floating. The 7 true connect at the vertebrae and at the sternum. The 3 that are false come together and do not connect, but connect to the final true rib. And the 2 floating don't connect to anything. The head and the neck of the ribs, you see the rib curves around and curves into the transverse process of the thoracic vertebrae and fuses in and connects with the ligaments of the transverse process of the vertebrae. And this is the tubercular of the rib. This is the neck and the head.